Legends among the stars. Grand Archon Telmar Valls adjusted his ceremonial collar as he gazed through the observation dome of the Celestial Harmony, flagship of the Galactic Coalition's diplomatic fleet. The swirling nebula before him cast prismatic colors across his scaled face, highlighting the intricate patterns that marked his status as the Coalition's highest diplomat. Archon, we're receiving the delegation from the Myriad Worlds in 10 minutes, announced Sub-Envoy Kira, her luminescent tendrils pulsing with anticipation. Very good, Telmar replied, his 4 eyes blinking in sequence, a gesture of acknowledgement among his species, the Draxians. Have the historical archives been prepared as requested? Yes, Archon. Though I must admit, their interest in human mythology seems peculiar. Telmar's upper lip curled in what passed for a smile among his kind. The Myriad representatives are scholars, Kira. Their fascination with extinct civilizations is well documented. And humans, well, they're the greatest mystery in our shared history. Humans had achieved a near-mythical status across the 23 civilizations that comprise the Galactic Coalition. Stories of the lost pioneers had persisted for over 7 centuries. Tales of a resourceful bipedal species that had mastered rudimentary spaceflight before mysteriously vanishing from their homeworld, just as they were on the cusp of joining the interstellar community. The historical records showed Coalition explorers arriving at Earth to find abandoned cities, dormant technology, and no trace of the civilization that built them. Some theorized a plague, others a catastrophic war or environmental collapse. The most romantic notion, and one Telmar secretly favored, was that humans had somehow achieved advanced spaceflight independently and departed en masse for parts unknown. Whatever the truth, humans had become the subject of countless artistic works, philosophical debates, and even religious movements across the Coalition. Their absence was a cautionary tale, a reminder of fragility in a galaxy where thousands of species had achieved harmony. The diplomatic chamber doors parted with a soft hiss as the Myriad delegation entered, tall, crystalline beings whose bodies refracted light in mesmerizing patterns. Their leader, Scholar Prime Zinthera, bowed in the formal Coalition greeting. Grand Archon, we thank you for hosting us aboard your magnificent vessel. Zinthera's voice resonated melodically. The historical materials you've provided have been most enlightening. It's our pleasure to assist your research, Telmar replied, though I admit curiosity about your specific interest in human records. Before Zinthera could respond, an urgent tone sounded throughout the chamber, and Commander Oxos, the vessel's security chief, burst through the doors, a breach of diplomatic protocol so severe that Telmar's gill flaps flared in shock. Forgive the intrusion, Archon, Oxos panted, his exoskeleton flushed with the cobalt hue of extreme distress. Our long-range sensors have detected anomalous energy signatures at the veiled boundary. The veiled boundary, the edge of Coalition space bordering the vast unknown regions that had remained unexplored for centuries due to dangerous spatial distortions. What kind of anomalies? Telmar asked, diplomatic composure instantly replaced with the sharp tone of a leader facing crisis. Artificial, sir. Propulsion systems unlike anything in our databases. At least 30 large vessels have emerged from the distortion field. Scholar Prime Zinthera stepped forward, crystalline form vibrating with sudden intensity. May I see the sensor readings, Commander? Though unusual, Telmar nodded his approval. The Myriad were renowned physicists. Their insight could prove valuable. Commander Oxos projected a holographic display in the center of the chamber. The images showed blurry outlines of sleek vessels, their energy signatures represented by pulsing red patterns. Zinthera circled the display, crystalline appendages tracing patterns in the air. These energy patterns, they bear remarkable similarities to theoretical models based on human technological fragments. Impossible, Telmar whispered. Humans have been extinct for 7 centuries. Or perhaps, Zinthera countered, they've merely been absent. 3 days later, Telmar stood on the command deck of the Coalition's most powerful defensive vessel, the Indomitable Will, as it approached the coordinates where the unknown fleet had been detected. Accompanying them were 5 escort vessels, the Coalition's show of strength tempered by the diplomatic banners displayed prominently on their hulls. "Any response to our communication attempts?" Telmar asked Admiral Vex, a veteran of the border wars whose segmented body bore the ceremonial scars of a dozen campaigns. "None, Archon." They maintained position just beyond standard hailing range. Telmar studied the tactical display. The unknown vessels had arranged themselves in a perfect crescent formation, not aggressive, yet unmistakably disciplined. "Military. Magnification at maximum," Admiral Vex announced as the primary view screen activated. The sight that greeted them sent a wave of murmurs through the command deck. The vessels were unlike anything in Coalition archives, elegant yet clearly designed for functionality, with sleek lines and what appeared to be advanced weapon systems integrated seamlessly into their hulls. But what drew Telmar's attention was the insignia visible on the largest ship, a circular emblem featuring a familiar blue-green world surrounded by stars. "Earth," he breathed. "They bear the symbol of Earth." "Incoming transmission," announced the communications officer, her voice quivering. "They're broadcasting on all frequencies, in perfect standard Coalition protocol." "On screen," ordered Admiral Vex. The view screen shifted to display a figure that sent gasps through the command deck. Bipedal, with smooth skin, bilateral symmetry, and facial features that matched every historical depiction of the lost species, a human. "This is Fleet Commander Elena Reyes of the Terran Alliance," the figure spoke, her voice calm and authoritative. "Your vessels have approached the monitoring boundary we established. State your intentions." Admiral Vex looked to Telmar, whose diplomatic training barely kept his shock contained. "I am Grand Archon Telmar Voles of the Galactic Coalition," he replied, stepping forward. "We detected your fleet's emergence from the veiled boundary and came to investigate. If you are indeed human, then this is a historic moment. Your species has been believed extinct for 7 centuries." The human's expression remained impassive, but something flickered in her eyes, amusement perhaps. "We are not extinct, Grand Archon. We simply chose isolation until certain conditions were met." "Conditions?" Telmar inquired. "The evolution of a stable galactic civilization, capable of true cooperation rather than conquest," she replied. "We've been watching your coalition develop from safe distance." The implication staggered Telmar. Humans hadn't vanished. They had withdrawn deliberately, observing from beyond the veiled boundary for centuries. "Commander Reyes," Telmar said, choosing his words carefully, "the Coalition would welcome formal diplomatic contact with the Terran Alliance. Would you agree to a meeting of representatives?" "That is acceptable." Reyes nodded. "We will permit 2 vessels to approach our flagship, the Prometheus. You may bring a delegation of no more than 12 individuals." After the transmission ended, Admiral Vex turned to Telmar, mandibles clicking nervously. "They permit us? They dictate terms, as if we aren't the established power in this region." "Perhaps in our region, Admiral," Telmar replied quietly. "But I suspect we know nothing of what lies beyond the boundary. These humans have been developing their civilization without contact or constraint for 7 centuries. We should proceed with both curiosity and caution." The diplomatic shuttle approached the human flagship, a massive vessel that dwarfed the Coalition craft. Telmar led the delegation, which included representatives from the major Coalition species, including Scholar Prime Zinthera, whose request to join had been surprisingly enthusiastic. As they docked with the Prometheus, Telmar couldn't help but notice the technological disparity. The human docking mechanisms adapted to their shuttle's specifications in real time, compensating for design differences without hesitation. They were greeted by an honor guard of humans in formal uniforms, a diversity of appearances that matched historical records. Different skin tones, hair colors, and facial features, yet unmistakably the same species. Commander Reyes stepped forward. In person, she projected an aura of quiet strength that Telmar's diplomatic training immediately recognized as the confidence of someone with superior position. "Welcome aboard the Prometheus, Grand Archon. If you'll follow me, the Admiral is waiting in the conference chamber." As they moved through the vessel's corridors, Telmar noted the efficient design, the seamless integration of technology, and the relaxed competence of the crew. This was not a civilization in decline or recently emerged from hiding. This was a thriving, advanced society. The conference chamber was a circular room with a magnificent view of space through transparent panels that Telmar suspected were far more than simple windows. At the center stood a table with chairs accommodated for the various physiologies of the coalition species, a detail that confirmed the humans had indeed been studying them thoroughly. An older human with silver hair and dark skin rose from his seat as they entered. "Grand Archon Telmar Vos," Commander Reyes announced, "may I present Fleet Admiral Marcus Chen, commanding officer of the Terran Exploration Division." "Welcome," Admiral Chen said, his voice deep and resonant. "Please, be seated. I imagine you have many questions." "Indeed, Admiral," Telmar replied, taking his place. "Perhaps the most pressing is why, after 7 centuries of isolation, the Terran Alliance chooses this moment to reveal itself to the Coalition." Admiral Chen exchanged a glance with Commander Reyes before responding. "Because isolation is no longer an option, Grand Archon. We face a threat that concerns both our civilizations." "What threat could be so significant that it would end 700 years of deliberate separation?" asked Zinthera, crystalline form pulsing with colors that indicated intense curiosity. Admiral Chen activated a holographic display above the table. It showed a region of space beyond the veiled boundary, with anomalous energy patterns spreading like cracks in reality itself. "We call them the Void Collective," Chen explained. "They exist partially outside normal spacetime, entering our reality to consume energy and resources before retreating to their dimension. They've been contained in a remote sector by our defense networks for centuries, but something has changed. Their incursions are becoming more frequent, more aggressive, and they're moving toward Coalition space." "If they've been contained for centuries," Admiral Vex interjected skeptically, "why are they suddenly a concern?" "Because we believe they've achieved consciousness," Commander Reyes answered. "What began as instinctive behavior has evolved into coordinated strategy. Our models predict they will breach the boundary within 3 standard Coalition months." Telmar studied the human leaders carefully. "Admiral Chen, why should the Coalition trust these claims from a civilization that has deliberately hidden its existence from us?" Chen smiled, a gesture Telmar recognized from historical records as indicating not offense, but appreciation of directness. "A fair question, Archon. The truth is, we need each other. The Terran Alliance has advanced technology and experience fighting the Void Collective, but we lack numbers. Your coalition has billions of citizens across thousands of worlds, but lacks the specific capabilities to combat this threat. But why hide from us for so long?" Telmar pressed. "The historical records show Earth was abandoned." "Not abandoned," Chen corrected. "Evacuated, secretly and systematically. When our early space explorers first encountered other species, what we witnessed concerned us deeply." He activated another holographic display, showing historical footage of early interspecies conflicts, resource wars, territorial disputes, and cultural subjugation that had occurred before the Coalition's founding principles took hold. "Humanity was unified but vulnerable," Chen continued. "We possessed promising technology, but were centuries behind the established powers. Rather than risk subjugation or exploitation, our ancestors made a difficult choice: to withdraw beyond the spatial distortions we could navigate but others could not, and build our civilization in secret." "You feared us," Zinthera observed. "We were cautious," Reyes clarified. "And history has proven that caution warranted." It took the Coalition 4 centuries to establish the principles of equality and cooperation that now govern your society. And you've been watching us all this time. Admiral Vex asked, mandibles clicking in agitation. Observing. Chen nodded. Learning. Waiting for the right moment to re-establish contact. Unfortunately, the Void Collective has forced our hand. Telmar processed this revelation. The implications were enormous. Not just the existence of humans, but an entire advanced civilization beyond the boundary, with technologies that clearly surpassed Coalition capabilities. Admiral Chen, Telmar said finally, if what you say about this Void Collective is true, the Coalition will need to verify your claims independently before committing to any joint action. Of course, Chen agreed readily. We're prepared to share our data and even escort your scientists to observe the Collective's activity from a safe distance. And in the meantime, Telmar asked. Commander Reyes stepped forward. In the meantime, Arkshan, we propose establishing formal diplomatic relations between the Terran Alliance and a galactic coalition. 7 centuries is long enough for humanity to remain a myth. It's time we became partners. As the meeting continued into the night cycle, Telmar found himself standing with Commander Reyes at one of the transparent panels, gazing at the stars. You know, he said quietly, across the coalition, humans have become legends, symbols of potential unfulfilled, of a species that reached for the stars but vanished before achieving their destiny. Reyes smiled. How ironic, then, that we've spent centuries among those very stars, watching and waiting. The question now, Telmar replied, is whether our species can move beyond legend and history to forge a new path together, especially with this Void Collective threatening both our civilizations. That, said Commander Reyes, is precisely what we intend to find out. Alliance of necessity. 3 weeks after the historic first contact, the Coalition Council chamber on Nexus Prime was filled beyond capacity. Representatives from all 23 member species had gathered to hear the findings of the scientific delegation that had accompanied the Terran vessels to observe the Void Collective phenomenon. Grand Archon Telmar stood at the central podium, flanked by Fleet Admiral Chen and Commander Reyes, whose presence on the Coalition capital world would have been unthinkable a month earlier. Esteemed council members, Telmar began, his voice amplified throughout the vast chamber. Our scientific team has completed its assessment of the data provided by the Terran Alliance regarding the threat known as the Void Collective. I now call upon Chief Scientist Morven to present their findings. Morven, a nebulon whose gaseous body was contained within an environmental suit, floated to the podium. The displays around the chamber activated, showing readings that most council members could barely comprehend. Our analysis confirms the Terran data, Morven announced, his voice modulated through his suit's speakers. The Void Collective represents a genuine and unprecedented threat. These entities exist in a dimensional state that allows them to move through normal space while being largely immune to conventional weapons. Murmurs spread through the chamber as Morven continued. The Terrans have developed specialized technologies that can affect these entities, containing them for centuries. However, as they reported, the Collective's behavior has evolved. They're now capable of coordinated action and strategic planning. And the time frame? Asked the Julon representative, her feathered crest rising in concern. Our projections align with the Terran estimate, Morven replied. The leading edge of the Collective will reach Coalition space within 68 standard days. The chamber erupted in anxious discussion until Telmar raised his hand for silence. In light of these findings, the High Council proposes a formal alliance with the Terran civilization. Admiral Chen has agreed to share defensive technology, while we will provide resources and personnel for a joint defense initiative. Predictably, objections came swiftly. The Drexian ambassador rose, his metallic exoskeleton glinting under the chamber lights. How can we trust these humans who have hidden from us for centuries? For all we know, they could have created this threat themselves as a pretext for infiltrating our society. Commander Reyes stepped forward, her calm demeanor unwavering. Ambassador, If conquest were our goal, this elaborate deception would be unnecessary. Our fleet could have crossed your borders at any time in the past 7 centuries. Instead, we maintained isolation until this threat forced our hand. Besides, Admiral Chen added, we're offering full access to our defensive technology. Your scientists can study and verify everything we provide. The debate continued for hours, but ultimately, the evidence was too compelling to ignore. By the session's end, the Coalition Council had voted, with a narrow margin, to establish the Joint Defense Initiative with the Terran Alliance. In the weeks that followed, designated worlds across the Coalition became hubs of frantic activity. Terran engineers worked alongside Coalition specialists to establish defensive positions and adapt their void-repelling technology for mass production. On Helios Station, the largest Coalition military installation, Admiral Vex watched with grudging admiration as Terran technicians reconfigured the station's weapon systems. Your people work quickly, he commented to Commander Reyes, who supervised the operation. We've had centuries of practice, she replied, then hesitated before adding, you still don't trust us entirely, do you, Admiral? Vex's mandibles clicked, a Draxian expression of thoughtful consideration. Trust requires time, Commander. Your civilization appeared suddenly, bearing tales of interdimensional threats and offering advanced technology. Even you must admit it's a scenario that invites skepticism. Reyes nodded. Fair enough. In your position, I'd likely feel the same. But know this, the Void Collective is real, and it doesn't discriminate between human and non-human. We're all just energy sources to them. There's something I've been meaning to ask, Vex said, changing the subject. If humans have been isolated beyond the boundary all this time, have you maintained Earth as your homeworld? A shadow passed across Reyes' face. No, Earth remains as you found it, abandoned. The environmental damage from our industrial age proved more severe than our ancestors anticipated. The planet is undergoing natural recovery, but it will be centuries before it's fully habitable again. Our population lives on terraformed worlds and in massive habitat stations throughout what we call the Enclave, the region beyond the boundary. So the exodus was as much from necessity as choice, Vex observed. Both, Reyes acknowledged. We needed new homes, and we needed time to develop without interference. But we never forgot our origins. Every Terran child learns about Earth, about the mistakes we made there, and the promise to do better among the stars. Their conversation was interrupted by an urgent alert. A young Terran officer approached, saluting both commanders. Admiral, Commander, we've detected void activity at the outer sensor perimeter. They're early. The Coalition battlecruiser Resolute Defender hung in formation with 3 Terran vessels, smaller but far more maneuverable, at the designated intercept coordinates. Through the viewports, the crew could see the fabric of space rippling like water disturbed by unseen movements beneath the surface. On the bridge, Grand Archon Telmar stood alongside Fleet Admiral Chen, both leaders having insisted on witnessing this first engagement personally. All vessels report ready, announced the tactical officer. Void resonance generators at full capacity. Remember, Chen cautioned, conventional weapons will have minimal effect. The resonators must be activated the moment they begin to materialize fully into our space. The ripples intensified, transforming into swirling distortions that seemed to fold reality upon itself. Then, emerging from these impossible geometries came the Void Collective, amorphous, shifting entities that appeared as negative space against the backdrop of stars, their forms absorbing light rather than reflecting it. By the first dawn, whispered Telmar, invoking an ancient Draxian prayer, they're unlike anything in our records. Resonators activated, reported the weapons officer. The Terran vessels moved with precision, establishing a triangular formation around the largest concentration of entities. Energy fields pulsed between the ships, creating a containment barrier that caused the void entities to recoil visibly. It's working, Chen said, tension evident in his voice. Maintain the field integrity. For several minutes, the strategy seemed effective, with the void entities unable to advance past the energy barrier. Then, without warning, several entities merged into a larger mass that pulsed with dark energy. "Field integrity dropping in Sector 7, shouted the tactical officer. The merged entity surged forward, partially penetrating the containment field. As it did, tendrils of darkness extended toward the Coalition vessel. "Evasive maneuvers," ordered Admiral Vex, but the massive battlecruiser was too slow to respond quickly. The tendrils made contact with the ship's hull, and immediately, power fluctuations cascaded through the vessel. Emergency lights activated as systems began to fail. "They're draining our energy directly," reported the engineering officer, panic evident in her voice. "Reroute all power through the secondary buffers," Chen commanded, taking control with practiced ease. "Focus remaining resonator energy on the contact points." The Terran vessels adjusted their position, concentrating their weapons on the area where the void entity connected with the Coalition ship. Energy beams of a peculiar blue-violet hue struck the tendrils, causing them to withdraw. "They're retreating," announced the sensor officer as the void entities began to pull back, their forms distorting as they slipped back through the dimensional barriers from which they had emerged. As the immediate danger passed, Admiral Chen turned to Telmar, his expression grave. "This was just a scouting party, perhaps a dozen entities testing our defenses. The main collective will be far more numerous and likely more coordinated." "How long do we have?" Telmar asked. "Based on this encounter, I estimate 3 weeks at most before the primary incursion." Chen's eyes reflected the stars beyond the viewport. "We need to accelerate the defense preparations. This encounter proved they're adapting faster than we anticipated." The following days saw unprecedented cooperation between the Terran Alliance and the Galactic Coalition. Void resonance technology was installed on hundreds of vessels and strategic locations, while Terran tacticians trained Coalition forces in combat techniques effective against the collective. On Nexus Prime, the Coalition capital, Grand Archon Telmar hosted a cultural exchange event, partially to strengthen the new alliance, but also to begin the process of reintroducing humanity to the galactic community. In the Grand Pavilion, representatives from both civilizations shared art, music, literature, and scientific achievements. Scholar Primes Zinthera approached Telmar as he observed the festivities, the crystalline being's form pulsing with colors indicating deep contemplation. "A remarkable development, isn't it?" Zinthera said. "For centuries, we studied humans as an extinct species, analyzing fragments of their culture like archaeologists piecing together ancient civilizations. Now they stand among us, very much alive and far more advanced than we could have imagined." "Indeed," Telmar agreed, "though I can't help but wonder how different galactic history might have been had they joined the interstellar community 7 centuries ago instead of withdrawing." "Different, certainly," came a voice behind them. Commander Rice approached, dressed in formal Terran attire rather than her usual uniform. "But not necessarily better." "You believe isolation was the right choice?" Telmar asked. "I believe it was the necessary choice at that time," Rice clarified. "The early interstellar powers were expanding aggressively. Humanity was unified, but technologically outmatched. Our ancestors made a calculated decision: retreat beyond the boundary, develop independently, and wait for a more stable galactic society to emerge." "The Coalition," Zinthera observed. "Precisely," Rice nodded. "We watched your civilization evolve from competing empires to cooperative members of a greater whole. When the Coalition's founding charter established principles of species equality and mutual respect, we began preparing for eventual contact, though we expected it to be on our terms, not forced by the Void Collective's advance." Before the conversation could continue, Admiral Chen approached, his expression betraying urgency despite his attempts to maintain diplomatic composure. "Forgive the interruption," he said quietly, "but we've received priority communications from our forward outposts. The Void Collective has begun its primary incursion, and they're moving faster than our revised estimates suggested. The combined fleet of Coalition and Terran vessels, the largest military force assembled in known history, formed a defensive line at the predicted emergence point. Over 300 capital ships and thousands of support vessels maintained position, their crews tense with anticipation. On the command deck of the newly commissioned joint flagship Concordia, Grand Archon Telmar and Admiral Chen monitored the tactical displays as Commander Reyes coordinated the Terran contingent. "All ships report ready," announced Admiral Vex from his station. "Void resonance systems at maximum capacity." Remember, Chen addressed the combined forces via fleet-wide communication. Conventional weapons are secondary. Primary focus must remain on the resonance fields. They're our most effective defense against the collective. The waiting seemed interminable, each minute stretching into what felt like hours. Then, with sudden violence that belied the silence of space, reality tore open before them. Not in the scattered ripples they had observed during the earlier encounter, but in a massive gaping wound in the fabric of space-time itself. "By all the stars," whispered Telmar as the sensors struggled to quantify what emerged. Thousands of void entities poured through the breach, some small and swift, others massive and ponderous, but all moving with unmistakable purpose. At their center was a colossal entity that seemed to dwarf even the largest vessels in the Allied fleet, its form constantly shifting yet somehow maintaining a vaguely geometric structure. "Primary target identified," Reyes announced, highlighting the central entity on the tactical display. "All Terran vessels, initiate Sunforge protocol." The Terran ships moved with coordinated precision, forming complex patterns that allowed their resonance fields to overlap and reinforce each other. Coalition vessels, following protocols established during their joint training, moved to support positions. The battle erupted with intensity that strained the comprehension of even the most veteran commanders. Void entities struck at Alliance vessels, attempting to drain their energy as they had during the earlier encounter. But this time, the fleet was prepared, resonance fields activated in synchronous patterns, repelling the attacks. Yet for every entity repulsed, more emerged from the spatial breach. The massive central entity remained distant, directing the smaller ones like pieces on a cosmic game board. "It's controlling them," realized Admiral Chen. "Coordinating their movements. That's why their attacks are so much more effective than our models predicted." "Then we need to disrupt that control," Telmar concluded. "Admiral, can we target the central entity directly?" "Not with our current position," Chen replied, studying the tactical display. "We'd need to penetrate their front lines, and that would leave our flanks exposed." Commander Reyes, who had been analyzing the battle patterns, stepped forward. "I have another option. The Prometheus carries our prototype void phaser, a device designed to temporarily phase our vessels into the same dimensional frequency as the collective. In theory, we could penetrate their defenses, deliver a concentrated resonance pulse to the central entity, and disrupt its control network." "In theory?" Vex questioned skeptically. "It's never been field-tested against an entity of this magnitude," Reyes admitted. "But our simulations suggest a high probability of success." "And the risks?" asked Telmar. Reyes met his gaze steadily. The ship implementing the strategy would be temporarily vulnerable to direct energy drain from the collective. If the phasing system fails while inside their defensive perimeter, total energy loss would be immediate. "I'll take the Prometheus," Admiral Chen declared, his decision clearly made before the discussion had even begun. "Sir," Reyes protested, "protocol dictates." "Protocol is superseded by necessity, Commander," Chen interrupted firmly. "You're needed here to coordinate the fleet if this fails." Besides, he added with a hint of the smile that had become familiar to Telmar over the past weeks, "I've been fighting these entities for 30 years. No one knows their patterns better." As preparations for the desperate maneuver proceeded, Telmar found himself alongside Chen in the shuttle bay as the Admiral prepared to return to his vessel. "I've studied your species' historical records," Telmar said quietly. Humans were often characterized by other species as reckless, impulsive, traits that were considered weaknesses. Chen chuckled. "And what do you think now, Grand Archon?" "I think," Telmar replied slowly, "that what others perceived as weaknesses were perhaps humanity's greatest strengths. The willingness to take calculated risks, to face the unknown with determination rather than fear." "High praise," Chen said, extending his hand in the human gesture of farewell that Telmar had learned. "Let's hope that determination is enough today." The Prometheus moved with surprising speed for a vessel of its size, breaking formation with the main fleet and accelerating toward the void breach. A dozen coalition ships provided escort, creating a corridor through the smaller entities with concentrated fire from their conventional weapons. On the Concordia's command deck, Telmar, Reyes, and the combined staff watched the tactical display with tense anticipation. The Prometheus had nearly reached the effective range for the void phaser deployment. "Energy surge detected from the central entity," reported the sensor officer. "It's responding to the approach." On the display, they watched as the massive void construct shifted, extending tendril-like projections toward the advancing Terran flagship. "The Prometheus is activating phasing systems," announced the communications officer, relaying reports from the escort vessels. "Phase transition in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. For a brief moment, the Prometheus seemed to flicker on the sensor display, its signature becoming indistinct, almost merging with the background energy patterns of the void entities. Then, it vanished from conventional sensors entirely. "Phase transition complete," confirmed Reyes, monitoring specialized equipment brought from the Terran fleet. "They're now operating in the void frequency spectrum. Standard sensors can't track them, but they should reappear on our displays when—" She was interrupted by a massive energy surge that rippled through the void entities. The central construct convulsed visibly, its geometric structure distorting as waves of energy pulsed outward from its center. "They've delivered the resonance pulse," Reyes exclaimed, her professional composure momentarily broken by excitement. Throughout the battlefield, the effect was immediate and dramatic. The smaller void entities, suddenly bereft of central coordination, moved erratically, their attacks losing coherence. Some began to retreat toward the spatial breach, while others seemed to dissolve into the background energy of space itself. "The Prometheus," Telmar asked urgently. "Any sign of reemergence?" Reyes checked her instruments, a frown forming. "They should have reverted to normal phase by now." Minutes passed with no signal from the Terran flagship. The central void entity continued to destabilize, its massive form beginning to collapse inward like a dying star. Smaller entities fled in increasing numbers, withdrawing through the spatial breach which had begun to contract. Just as hope for the Prometheus was fading, a flash of energy erupted at the edge of the dissolving void construct. "Contact," shouted the sensor officer. "Terran signature detected. It's the Prometheus." The vessel that emerged bore little resemblance to the sleek flagship that had entered the fray. Its hull was scorched and distorted, with entire sections missing and emergency force fields containing atmosphere in multiple areas. But it was moving under its own power, slowly limping back toward the Allied fleet. "Admiral Chen is hailing us," announced the communications officer. Chen's image appeared on the main display, his uniform torn, and a gash visible on his forehead. Behind him, the Prometheus's bridge was illuminated by emergency lighting, and damage control teams worked frantically. "Mission accomplished," he reported, his voice steady despite his appearance. "The central entity has been neutralized. Without its coordination, the remaining void constructs are retreating." A cheer erupted across the Concordia's command deck, Coalition and Terran personnel alike celebrating the victory that had seemed impossible mere hours before. "The Void Collective will return," Chen cautioned once the celebration subsided. "This was a decisive battle, but not the end of the war. They'll adapt, evolve new strategies. But next time," he added with a meaningful glance toward Telmar, "they'll face a united response." 2 months after the Battle of the Breach, as it came to be known, representatives from the Galactic Coalition and the Terran Alliance gathered on Nexus Prime for a historic ceremony. The Grand Council chamber, usually reserved for Coalition deliberations, had been reconfigured to accommodate the formal signing of the Alliance Treaty. Grand Archon Telmar and Admiral Chen stood side by side at the ceremonial table, the document before them representing months of negotiation and the beginning of a new era in galactic civilization. For 7 centuries, Telmar addressed the assembled dignitaries. Humans existed in our collective consciousness as a lost potential, a species that reached for the stars but vanished before achieving their destiny among them. Today, we recognize that humanity never truly disappeared. They simply chose a different path, developing their society beyond our knowledge until circumstance brought us together. Admiral Chen stepped forward. The Terran Alliance enters this treaty with hope for the future and respect for the past. Our ancestors made the difficult of the story from where we left off. Admiral Chen stepped forward. The Terran Alliance enters this treaty with hope for the future and respect for the past. Our ancestors made the difficult decision to separate from the emerging galactic community, believing isolation was necessary for our survival and development. Today, we rejoin that community as equals, partners in facing challenges that threaten all sentient life. The treaty was signed with ceremonial flourish, holographic records capturing the moment for historical archives across both civilizations. As formal proceedings concluded, the gathering transitioned to a celebration that blended cultural traditions from dozens of worlds. Commander Rice found Telmar observing the festivities from a quiet alcove. "Quite the achievement," she remarked, joining him. "6 months ago, your people thought mine were extinct. Now we're military allies and trading partners." "Necessity is a powerful motivator for cooperation," Telmar replied. "Though I suspect the true test of this alliance will come during peacetime, not war." "You're concerned about cultural integration." "Among other things," Telmar admitted. "The Coalition took centuries to develop our current harmony. Your civilization evolved in isolation, with different values and perspectives. There will be challenges." Rice nodded thoughtfully. "There will. But consider this. Humans have spent centuries studying the Coalition from afar. We've observed your cultures, learned your languages, understood your histories. We may be newcomers to the galactic community, but we're not ignorant of it." "A fair point," Telmar conceded. "And perhaps the mystery of humanity can finally be properly studied. Your species has fascinated scholars across the Coalition for generations, including Scholar Prime Synthera," Rice asked with a knowing smile. "I've noticed their particular interest in human history." "The myriad have always been drawn to puzzles," Telmar explained, "and humanity represented the greatest unsolved mystery in our shared galactic history." Their conversation was interrupted by Admiral Chen approaching with Admiral Vex, both looking uncharacteristically relaxed. "Grand Archon, Commander," Chen greeted them. "I believe this is what humans once called a historic moment worth commemorating." "Indeed," agreed Vex, mandibles arranged in what Telmar recognized as his species' expression of satisfaction. "Though I admit, I'm curious what comes next. The Void Collective is contained for now, but not defeated. And beyond that immediate threat, there's the matter of integrating Terran territories with Coalition space." "One step at a time, Admiral," Chen replied. "Today we celebrate a new beginning. Tomorrow, we build on it." As the celebration continued around them, Telmar gazed out at the stars visible through the chamber's transparent dome. Somewhere beyond those stars, beyond the known regions of Coalition space and the newly revealed Terran territories, the remnants of the Void Collective were regrouping. The threat would return, perhaps in ways they couldn't yet anticipate. But for the first time in centuries, humanity stood revealed not as a myth or cautionary tale, but as living partners in the cosmic community. Whatever challenges the future held, they would face them together. The species that had built a thriving civilization in secret and the alliance that had united the known galaxy. The legends had become reality, and the galaxy would never be the same again.